Hello and welcome to the 700 Club. Charlottesville was lit by candlelight last night, less than a week after the city was illuminated by hundreds of torches. And while the people there are dealing with the aftermath of the racist riots, President Trump is facing more backlash over his comments. Mark Martin has the story.
Hundreds gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia Wednesday night for a march for peace, less than a week after a scene filled with hate and chaos. Participants held a candlelight vigil in honor of 32-year-old Heather Heyer, the woman killed when an attacker drove a car into a crowd of counter-protesters at a white nationalist rally. The vigil followed an emotional memorial service for Heyer.
No father should have to do this.
They tried to kill my child to shut her up. Well, guess what? You just magnified her.
President Trump tweeted about Heyer, calling her beautiful and incredible and a truly special young woman. On CBN's Faith Nation Wednesday, one of the president's evangelical advisors, Pastor Robert Jeffress, blasted the white supremacy movement as demonic. He also said liberals are wrong when they accuse President Trump of supporting racism.
There is an effort to do whatever is necessary to take this president down, and they have painted, the media has painted, the liberals have painted a false narrative that the president is a racist, and anytime he tries to break out of that box, liberals aren't going to allow him to do it. I know the president, you know the president, there is not a racist bone in his body.
And evangelist Franklin Graham said Satan is to blame for the racist riots, not the president. But the president's news conference comments on the violence in Charlottesville have sparked outrage across the country.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides.
Corporate leaders protested by pulling out of Trump's business advisory councils, so the president has now closed down his economic panels. He tweeted, "Rather than putting pressure on the business people of the Manufacturing Council and Strategy and Policy Forum, I am ending both. Thank you all." The Charlottesville uproar has also led to efforts to remove symbols of the Confederacy in cities across the country. In Baltimore, the statues are already coming down. The mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, had workers cover the city's 52-foot Confederate memorial obelisk with wooden panels. And in Norfolk, Virginia, a large crowd gathered Wednesday evening at the Confederate Monument for a peaceful protest.
I'm here to support equality. I believe in 2017 we've progressed so much as a society that we should not allow the freedom of speech to encourage hate and to produce hate.
Many Christian leaders this week are calling for the church to lead the way in a country that needs reconciliation and healing. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, it's obvious from what we've experienced in the last week that racism does exist. I think we've probably never heard more voices that are speaking out for inclusiveness, for appreciation, for making your voice heard without being violent. Violence begets violence. And I would, on the heels of having said that, just remind you of the book that we featured earlier this week called The Smear by journalist Sharyl Attkisson. Take a look at the book and be very careful where your focus is being redirected in the day that we live in. There's an agenda out there. Well, rumors of war with North Korea are subsiding for now, but the threat's actually still growing. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Terry. China and South Korea both say there will be no war with North Korea. The South Korean president saying, "I can confidently say there will not be a war again on the Korean peninsula." And a top Chinese general is advising the U.S. to take military action off the table. He made the comment in Beijing at a meeting with the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Joseph Dunford says a military solution to the problem would be, quote, absolutely horrific. But he added it's unimaginable to allow Kim Jong-un to develop a nuclear warhead that could target South Korea and the United States. Well, while North Korea has taken a step back from the brink of war, it seems the rogue regime may be buying more time. CBN News has learned Pyongyang could be close to an even more powerful weapon, posing an even greater future threat. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest.
As if the news out of North Korea wasn't bad enough, things might get a whole lot worse within the next 18 months. There's word that Kim Jong-un and his regime may soon develop a hydrogen bomb.
I spoke to a Pentagon source last week that revealed to me that North Korea is anywhere from 6 to 18 months away from developing a hydrogen bomb.
Harry Kazianis heads up the defense studies at the Center for National Interest.
It isn't ludicrous to think that the North Koreans, even though their economy is 1/3 the size of Ethiopia, can do this. If you put in enough money, if you starve enough of your own people, you can build things like this.
Kazianis says dictator Kim Jong-un claimed to have tested an H-bomb last year, but most experts dismiss that, arguing the North might have had a more powerful atomic bomb. An atomic bomb was the kind that dropped on Japan at the end of the Second World War. Well, experts say a hydrogen bomb uses nuclear fusion and can be far more powerful by 1,000 times or more. If an H-bomb hit New York, the death toll could reach over 3.4 million. Now North Korea said it will launch thousands-fold revenge against the United States for what it called America's villainous actions against our country and people, warning that if the U.S. thinks it will be safe because it's across an ocean, there is no bigger misunderstanding. The statement came after the UN Security Council unanimously approved tough new U.S.-drafted sanctions, including a ban on coal and other exports worth over $1 billion.
These sanctions will cut deep, and in doing so will give the North Korean leadership a taste of the deprivation they have chosen to inflict on the North Korean people.
Pentagon officials say hydrogen bombs are heavier than a standard atomic device, so Kim would potentially need a more advanced missile than what he has tested so far to carry a larger payload to hit the United States. Unfortunately, North Korea seems to be working on such a missile, known as the KN-08, a 3-stage missile which some believe might be North Korea's next missile test. So what is our option?
In the long term, what I think we do, we have to do punishing unilateral sanctions on Chinese banks and Chinese state-owned enterprises. Those are the real lifeblood of the North Korean regime.
Experts say we cannot continue to deny what North Korea's military machine can accomplish. If we pretend it cannot happen, that's not only a bad idea, but it's almost a guarantee that it will happen. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Eric. Well, turning overseas, a new report reveals more Jewish Israelis visited the Temple Mount last month than any other in half a century. 3,200 Jewish visitors made the trek to the holy site. That despite escalating tension and violence after 3 Israeli Arabs killed 2 policemen in a terror attack. Israel had launched extra security measures at the Temple Mount to prevent more terrorism, but those measures were later relaxed after an intense backlash. Let's go back to Terry for more on this story.
Thanks, John. Well, joining us now is our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. He's the author of the book ISIS, Iran, and Israel, What You Need to Know About the Middle East Crisis and the Upcoming War. Chris, it's great to have you
Terry,
with us.
great to be with you.
You know, the Temple Mount is always a bit of a confusion to me. There's always tension there. Seems to have relaxed itself a little bit for the moment. But what's the underlying issue there?
I think the basic underlying conflict is who's going to be in control of the Temple Mount. You know, it was 17 years ago today that I went with Liz and our children to establish a news bureau there in Jerusalem. And 5 weeks later, what's called the Second Intifada began. And the claim then was that the Al-Aqsa Mosque was in danger. It's the same claim now, that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is in danger by the Jewish Israeli state. And but even though it's a false narrative, that's something that they continue to claim. And even 50 years later, after Israel finally took over the Temple Mount, after more than 2,000 years, that's still the issue. Who's going to be in control of the Temple Mount? Yeah.
Well, you know, that's the confusion of it. You know that it's Israeli turf in a sense, but controlled by what seems to be going on the other side.
Right. Israel has sovereignty over the Temple Mount, but the administrative day-to-day activities are controlled by the Islamic Waqf. But the ultimate goal of many Muslims is to reclaim the Temple Mount for themselves. And that's the conflict.
Well, Iran seems to remain the top threat to Israel and a lot of the world.
Exactly.
But talk a little bit about the recent conversation you had with former Congressman Frank Wolf.
I just talked to him last night just outside of Washington, D.C., and he talked about that Iran is the main threat right now to Israel. And right now there's a race for the ruins inside Syria after the Syrian civil war. Iran is pouring in men and machines and weapons to that area to try to reclaim that area. What they're trying to do is have a land bridge all the way from Tehran, from Iran, all the way to the Mediterranean. Once they do that, they can pour more men and munitions and establish military bases to threaten Israel. Now, Israel will have to do something to counter that. They may strike those bases, and if they do, that could lead to a direct war between Israel and Iran. which means that even though ISIS is being defeated, it could lead to a more dangerous season right now after the Syrian civil war. And one other thing that he told me, Terry, was the fact that many Christians right now, Christianity is really at risk in northern Iraq, and it may suffer in the next 6 months if something's not done by the Trump administration, and if the Christian church doesn't speak out in the West. Many of these Christians won't go back to the homes that had been destroyed by ISIS.
Does speaking out make a difference?
Yes, it does. Makes a big difference. In fact, many of the Christians over there say, why isn't the church in the West speaking out more for us? And many times they feel abandoned because of what's happened in the last few years.
Yeah. Well, their whole lifestyle's been threatened there.
That's true.
We thank you. I know next week we're going to have a report from you on some fascinating things about what's going on with the Dead Sea. So we'll look forward to that as well. It's always great to have you here.
Great to be with you,
Thank you
Terry.
so much. It's like you come home.